In this lecture, we will discuss about the history of advertising in India. Now, before I begin with the history of advertising in India, I'll give you a snapshot about what is advertising. Advertising is a form of communication intended to persuade an audience to purchase or take an action upon an idea, product, or a service. In 1948, American Marketing Association defined advertising as the non-personal communication of information, usually paid for and persuasive in nature, about products, services, and ideas by identified sponsors through the various media. Now, there are some terms to be defined very carefully. Non-personal. Yes, advertising is non-personal as it is ubiquitous. It has to deal with hundreds, thousands, and millions of customers at the same time. And there is no face-to-face communication between the customers and the advertisers. Advertising is a form of communication. Yes, it transfers information, ideas, feelings from one person to another. Here, sound is extremely important as it is used in radio and television. Words are best suited to deliver logical arguments, discuss the pros and cons, and evoke some emotion. The most useful form of communication in advertising is sight. As you know, a picture can say 1,000 words. Information. Advertisers give information to the customers that they think the customers require to make the decision about the particular product, idea, or the service. Yes, advertising is paid. It is paid because the print media sells space for advertisements and the electronic media sells time for advertisements. Identified sponsors. Advertisers refer to identified sponsors, that is, who puts the advertisement and what they want from the customers. Now, we'll move on to the history of advertising in India. Advertising in India dates back to the Indian civilization. Relics of Harappa, Mohenjo-daro indicates the names engraved on exquisite stone and the metal works. These can be termed as the forerunners of Indian advertising. Even the wall paintings and the stone engravings are the forerunners of advertising in India. The earliest form of advertising were mostly used for religious purposes. It was also used as a medium for propaganda. Now, to spread the teachings of Gautama Buddha, Emperor Ashoka engraved rock and pillar edicts. These rock and pillar edicts were the forerunners of Indian advertising. Thus, the outdoor advertisements that came into light as the point of sale display in marketplaces, while the wall paintings and the cave paintings referred to as the indoor visual communication. Till the advent of the British rule in India, advertising was not taken at all for the business purposes. The reasons being India as the unique example of household industrial activities. At the time of the British entry, India was in a village economy stage where there was a direct communication between the producers and the consumers. There were weekly local markets and the producers displayed their wares by shouting and even promoting samples for the trade. British settlement and the ruling from 1600 onwards brought about sudden change in the Indian society. The British popularized their luxury goods through advertising in the print medium only. The first printing press was brought by the Portuguese in India in 1556 and they only printed Christian literature. It was only in the 1780 that India saw the first newspaper by James Augustus Hickey namely the Bengal Gazette. It was in the Bengal Journal that all the government advertisements appeared during that period of time. There were no advertising agencies back then, but the newspapers already provided the space selling services. And most importantly, to be noted in this case, the Britishers used print media only to display the government ads and not of any other products. The origin of commercial advertising in India is relatively with the start of the first advertising agency in India, namely B. Dattaram and Company in the year 1905. It released the first ad for the West End Watch Company in Mumbai in 1907. Advertising growth was very slow back then, and only few companies were into the advertising business, but they focused on media buying services more and they gave very little importance to creative work. Until the outbreak of the World War I, most of the advertising was planned and placed by the foreign manufacturers. During the First World War, the newspaper circulation was increased as people were more interested and enthusiastic to know about the hot war affairs. During the post-war period, Indian market was flooded with foreign goods, and this gave rise to a number of newspaper circulation as number of ads appeared in the newspaper itself. After the World War, Indian agencies failed due to acute competition with the British and the American agencies. Indian agencies had a very tough time, but they learned in detail about advertising business as a very rich source of employment and earning as well. Indian agencies tried outdoor advertising as many newspapers were under the government control. Now, in this case also, few things to be noted. Indian agencies could not give advertisements in the newspapers as all the newspapers were under the government control, and government did not allow Indian products to be advertised in the newspapers back then. In 1918, the first professionally managed advertising agency was set up in India, namely Tata Publicity. In fact, 1930s, there was a tremendous period of consolidation in the history of Indian advertising in the 1930s. The Swadeshi movement made a turning point also in this era. This movement led to the increased appearance of advertisements in the country with a view to popularize Indian goods against the imported stuff. Indian advertising has many changing faces. The pre-independence advertisements were mostly about ladies' goods, gents' clothes, gramophone, tea and the like. And most importantly, the target audience of these particular products were the British people in India, the princely families, and definitely people from the upper strata of the society. It was only after the post-independence period that the princely families were abandoned and a new middle-class family appeared in the Indian scenario, which attracted the advertisers. The 1930s, the first full-fledged advertising agency was set up in 1931. There was increased competition demanded a thorough improvement in the quality of ad work and services, and for this, the Indian ad agencies sent their employees abroad for special training in artwork and copy illustration. Thomson Advertising Agency started operation in India in 1930 again. In 1930, the talkies and the radio emerged as a very strong medium of communication. The 1930s can again be considered as the period of consolidation in the history of Indian advertising. In 1936, All India Radio started telecasting various programs, and in 1939, Indian and Eastern Newspaper Society was founded to protect and promote the interests of newspapers and to deal collectively with the government, agencies and advertisers. 1940s, a very crucial period. Three eventful happenings occurred in the 1940s. 1. The Second World War. 2. The Great Famine. And 3. The fight for independence. By the end of the World War II, the political and economic scene in India underwent a drastic change. Consequently, the scarcity conditions prevailing in the Indian economy gave much impetus to the growth and development of light and small-scale industries. In 1941, Indian Language Newspaper Association was formed to deal with the problems of the language newspapers. And in 1945, Association of Advertising Agencies of India was formed to raise the standard of advertising and regulation of advertising practices through a special code of conduct. The 1950s. Industrial Revolution in the Nehruvian era. Cinema advertising began in the 1950s just after independence. In 1956, Kolkata gets the privilege of India's first advertising club. In 1957, the government launches the Vivid Bharati services, the youth wing service of the All India Radio. The leading ad agency, Press Syndicate, started operation during the 1950s. And in 1952, Indian Society of Advertisers was formed to promote interest of advertisers to raise the standard of Indian advertising, as they had to fight with the foreign agencies in their work and copy. After independence, the first 5-year plans were implemented and several factories and large-scale projects emerged in Indian continent. Consequently, production and transportation facilities have increased tremendously. Hence, there was a need for advertisers in promoting the transport system all over the country. Now, the 1950s can be referred to as the golden age of Indian advertising. The 1960s, another very crucial period. Television and film industry attained popularity during the 1960s. Radio advertising has been introduced by All India Radio in 1967 at Bombay and slowly spread its wings to other metropolitan cities. Advertisements were accepted in different languages during this period of time. Regular TV broadcast started in 1965. The 1970s. Television setup was delinked from All India Radio in 1976 under a new name, Doordarshan. The 1976 and 77 was a turning point in the history of Indian advertising. Commercial advertising was first introduced in 1976 and sponsored programs also started during this period. Now, in this particular, there's a glimpse of some pictures or glimpse of some newspaper advertising where celebrity endorsement took place. We can see Gabbar Singh of Sholay endorsing Britannia Glucon-D, Kanan Devi endorsing Lux soap. So at that time, after 1970s, celebrity were used in advertisement in newspapers. The 1980s. The first burst of public sector advertising was in the 1980s, but what catapulted the industry to a higher plane was the landmark launch of color television in India in 1982. Color printing in newspapers and magazines also brought a drastic change in the advertising business. In 1985, the Advertising Standard Council of India (ASCI) was born to proclaim serious role of advertising in competitive scenario. Satellite TV was ushered an epochal change in entertainment in awareness of trends and lifestyles abroad. It has also dramatically expanded media options and influenced the styles and substances of advertising, which is now richer and stronger than before. Economic liberalization created challenges as well as opportunities for advertising in Indian continent. The newspaper ads has started using color printing technology. Now they have used, most of the layout has been dominated by visuals, very brief copy, because at that time creative illustration was not taken a look into. Technological advancements have changed the functioning of advertising agencies in India. Computers and computer graphics have brought new power, versatility, speed and value to advertisement production in our country. Advancements in printing technology and color processing have enabled the Indian advertisers to bring out high-fidelity advertisements of international standard in various magazines and periodicals. Rasna, this is an example of the first concentrated drink in India, got a huge success after the promotion through newspaper advertising and television advertising as well. Kids were used as a medium of communication in advertising back then as well, as kids can attract the customers more than the elders. We can see some kids picturized in Pepsi ads, Action Shoes ad, Rasna ad, Camel ads. Why do we use kids as a medium of communication in advertisements? As kids can relate to the audience directly and better, they can capture the audience better than the elders. On analyzing the history of the growth of the media advertisement expenditure in India from 1985 to 2003, it can be seen that the media advertising in our country has shown a steadily increasing trend from Rs 580 crore in 1985 to Rs 15,000 crore in 2003. The media-wise advertisement expenditure in India from 1997 to 2001 reveals that the advertising expenditure in print media is the highest when compared to that of other media. The advertising expenditure in print media as well as on other media except TV has been showing declining trend, while that in TV has been showing an increasing trend. The ad expenditure in print media in India during the year 1997 was Rs 3258 crore, which come to 57.25% of the total. But during the year 2001, it was 6,216 crore, which constitute about 51.8% of the total expenditure. The advertising expenditure in television in India has shot up from 40.46% during year 2001, which was only 34.60% of the total during 1997. Over the past few years, hundreds of advertisers have emerged in India, but India's advertising scenario is dominated by the 6 companies like Hindustan Unilever Limited, Colgate-Palmolive India, ITC, Dabur India, LG Electronics India, Nestle India and McDowell and Company. Among the advertising giants, Hindustan Lever Limited assumes the first position during the year 2000 and 2001. Colgate-Palmolive India, ITC and Dabur India assume second, third and fourth position respectively. In India, advertisements of an array of items have been appearing in the mini screen. Among these, toilet soaps, toothpastes and detergents are the predominating items advertised in the television. This indicates the increased importance assumed by them during recent years in our economy. It becomes more pertinent in the cases of the states of Kerala, where people are highly hygiene conscious. Today, advertising have changed drastically with the invention of digital advertising. Indian ad agencies have flourished more and more, and now they are even competing with the foreign agencies. Digital marketing and digital advertising have taken a huge market business in the Indian subcontinent, and they are fighting to come up with new and better products in the market soon.